So, you thought we might finish on a high tonight. Well, you're wrong. We're going to finish underground. A regular at Talking Tales, Jonathan Evans is a storytelling superstar. He's an audio short story book coming out in May, courtesy of Tangent Books, called The Mystery of Ernie Taylor's Abdomen, and whatever else is in it, it's worth buying just for that. But for tonight, to finish on a high, I give you, with sandwiches and the bond of trust, Jonathan Evans.
Right, sandwiches. I must admit, I've never really been a fan of sandwiches, and I can't remember where my distaste for them comes from, but I think it might be something to do with the potted meat sandwiches, which were trotted out regularly on a Sunday afternoon in grandmother's house. I remember looking at them and thinking, Christ, how could you eat that muck? Anyway, most people seem to enjoy them, and sandwiches would appear from time to time. I remember when my brother Richard started working for Raleigh in Nottingham. It was miles away and involved a bus and a train journey, and required him to get up for work almost before he went to bed. My dad got into the habit of making him sandwiches to take to work. They were salad dressing sandwiches. To this day, my brother can't think about them without wanting to throw up. I thought they looked revolting and were vaguely reminiscent of something he might regurgitate after a bad night out at the Nag's Head. Anyway, my younger brother, Nick, started working at Newstead Colliery when he was 15. His job interview was quite interesting. My dad, who was a Freemason, was eager to give him some secret tips, and he told Nick, when you go for an interview, if they ask you if you have any other names, you must say yes, and tell them that this other name is Lewis. Nick looked puzzled. Why should I do that? My dad said, it's a secret sign. It'll let them know that you're a member of the Freemason fraternity and you'll get the job. Now, this might have worked well if Nick had been going for a job at Barclays Bank on Station Street, or even a clerical job at Bray's Toy Shop on Lowmore Road. But at Newstead Colliery, nobody needed a secret code name to get a job, because this was 1965 and jobs were 10 a penny. I remember the day of Nick's interview. He told me he'd been ushered into a small room and given a form to complete. The selection process seemed to be straightforward. Fill in your name, age, date of birth and address, and start next Monday. Basically, it was, if you're alive, you've got the job. They had to go through the motions, however, so Nick was asked a few perfunctory questions. The most difficult, Nick recalled, was, why do you want to work at Newstead Colliery? Nick didn't really have an answer for that. I mean, who would have an answer? Never mind, it didn't seem to worry the bloke the other side of the desk. The difficulty came when the interviewer started to go through Nick's application form. When he got to the section where Nick had filled in his Christian name and surname, he asked, have you got any other names? It had all been going swimmingly up to this point, and Nick was not quite sure how to answer. He paused for a moment and replied, sort of. The interviewer looked puzzled. What do you mean, sort of? Nick was embarrassed, and I guess he went into panic mode. Well, I've sort of got another name. It's secret. What do you mean it's secret? Nick decided to go the whole lot. It's Lewis, he muttered, and flashed a conspiratorial smile. Lewis? Yeah. Well, it's not what it says on your birth certificate. Nick said, no, I told you already. It's secret. The interviewer shifted uncomfortably, and Nick said there was a rather ambiguous tension between them for a moment. It took quite a few minutes for the interviewer to regain his composure, and I'm not surprised. I don't think he'd ever had an applicant for Newstead Colliery with a secret name. I'm not sure what happened in the rest of the interview, but I do know that when Nick came home, he was not best pleased. The front door slammed and he stormed into the kitchen and swore at me dad. Now, nobody ever swore at me dad, but Nick did on this day. He used the F word quite a lot. It was a word you never heard in our household. He said, "What the effing hell do you think you're doing telling me to use that name Lewis? The bloke down at Newstead Colliery thinks I'm an absolute bloody idiot. I look like I didn't know my own effing name." My dad couldn't placate him and Nick stormed off upstairs. Despite all of this, Nick did get the job, and that leads us back to sandwiches. Now, one thing you need to know about my dad was that he was really gentle, a lovely guy, and he looked after us kids. He used to, as I've mentioned, make sandwiches for us if we were going anywhere. He knew I didn't like sandwiches, so I was out of the firing line. But Nick and Richard, they sometimes had sandwiches imposed upon them. Nick quite liked it, because he managed to reach an accommodation with my dad. Nick would usually have cheese sandwiches, and my dad couldn't ruin them. I remember one famous day, however, we must have run out of cheese. Nick was sitting in front of the telly before heading off on night shift. My dad asked Nick what he wanted in his snap tin. Now, when you're working down the pit, you consume a lot of calories, and everyone would take a large snap tin that was full of high protein, high carbohydrate food. You know the sort of thing, cheese, a big piece of cake and some fruit. I remember on this particular day, my dad saying to Nick, "Do you want pork pie or sandwiches?" And Nick saying, "Yes," absent-mindedly. He was watching Thunderbirds or something on the telly. When Nick came home the next morning, again he went absolutely bananas. He said to me dad, "What the hell did you put in my sandwich tin?" And my dad said, "Pork pie sandwiches." Nick looked at him. He said, "Have you ever tried eating pork pie sandwiches?" He said, "It's like eating a cardboard box. It's inedible. The people at work, nobody wanted any. I couldn't even swap any of it." My dad looked at him and said, "Well, I asked you if you wanted pork pie or sandwiches, and he said yes, so I thought I'd make you a pork pie sandwich." Nick wasn't impressed, and after that, he started making his own sandwiches, which is, I think, what we later called a win-win scenario. But I remember that not long after he came back from work in a really black mood. He said, "Some bastard's been stealing my snap." Now, Nick worked with a gang of folks down near the coalface. It was filthy and dangerous work, but comradeship was everything. There was an unwritten law. Each man depended on the next, and mutual trust was an absolute necessity. Your life depended on it. But on this occasion, somebody had broken the bond of trust. There had been a spate of thefts from within the team, and there was a pattern to the thefts. The pattern was food. People would find an apple had gone missing, or a piece of cake, but the most frequent target of the thief was sandwiches. Now, this had happened to Nick. And although he was young, he was the sort of character you wouldn't want to tangle with. He was ferociously strong. And he was a real street fighter. People were frightened of him. He had the honour of having his own pit horse. And he used to ride down to the coalface. You might say he was quite the man about the pit. He told me how he used to wake his horse up. He said that if his pit horse was lying on the floor asleep, there was a technique he'd use, which I don't think you'd find in many equestrian magazines. It was called Wazzing in its Tab. Nick told me he could kick the pit horse and prod it and cajole it, but believe it or don't, Nick assured me that the only thing that worked was to piss in its ear hole. Now, Nick had this off pat, so that after the first few drops, the horse would jump up, shake its head, and trot off as happy as Larry. By the way, once a year, the horse would come out for a week and graze in the fields above ground, while the local school children fed him apples and sugar lumps. Remarkably, despite the almost constant risk of urinary infections, his horse lasted quite a long time. Anyway, let's get back to the sandwiches. Nick figured he'd lay a trap for the sandwich thief. He noticed another pattern. Nick noticed that the thief liked potted meat, so this is how the trap worked. On this particular day, Nick took 2 slices of bread and butter. He got some droppings from his horse's stable and spread the sandwiches with it, wrapped it in greaseproof paper, and let it be known that he'd got potted meat sandwiches for lunch. Snap time, the gang sat down near the coalface on pieces of old conveyor belt. Nick said to the assembled group, "Somebody's been stealing me sandwiches, and today they think they've got potted meat, but they haven't. Actually, it's horse shit. So you're all going to take out your snap and eat it here, right now. And if I find out who's been stealing, I'll kill him." He watched. To one side, one of his workmates was almost gagging over his food, but he ate it. Surprisingly, Nick and his mates never had a problem with sandwich thefts again. So, whenever I'm searching for a quick bite to eat, you'll never find me at the sandwich counter. In fact, whenever I see folks filling their cheeks with the latest off-the-shelf offering, I find myself wondering just what exactly is mixed in all that gelatinous glue that seems to be slormed all over most of them. But then again, perhaps it's best I never find out.
Thank you. Please give it up for Jonathan Evans.